On the day we were supposed to leave for our honeymoon, Ethan Hale's secretary insisted on coming with us. When we arrived at the airport, she wanted to go hiking. I wanted to see the snow. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then chose to do what his secretary wanted. He didn't ask for my opinion at all before changing our entire itinerary. That day, I didn't board the plane. I went alone to Anchorage, Alaska. I'd begged Ethan for so long before he finally agreed to take me on a honeymoon. I'd picked out our destination with such joy, but on the morning we were supposed to leave, Ethan showed up with his secretary in tow. My hand, clutching my suitcase, fell limp at my side. I couldn't name the feeling twisting in my chest. Just before boarding, Ethan's secretary announced she didn't want to go see the snow anymore, claiming she hadn't brought warm enough clothes. She smiled at me, but her eyes never left the man beside her. Mrs. Hale, why don't we go hiking instead? Mr. Hale and I went climbing a few days ago, but that mountain was too short, didn't get to really enjoy himself. She tilted her head up to glance at him secretly, her eyes soft with adoration. The man hesitated for a beat, then murmured his agreement. All right, Anchorage is too cold. You're too delicate for that weather. From start to finish, Ethan didn't ask me a single question about what I wanted. I stood there silently, watching him rebook our tickets for a completely different destination. Then I saw the unmistakable look of love on the woman's face, and suddenly, I was tired. It was the 10th year of my secret love for Ethan Hale, and today, for the first time, I thought about giving up. I didn't walk toward the boarding gate. Instead, I called out to Ethan. He turned around, frowning when he saw how far away I was standing. Ren, you were the one who insisted on a honeymoon. What are you throwing a fit about now? So he did know this was supposed to be our honeymoon. I'd thought he'd forgotten entirely. My voice was cold when I spoke. I'm not coming with you. You two go ahead. Ethan's frown deepened. He stared at me, saying nothing. Angela Carter squeezed his fingertip and shook her head slightly. The airport was crowded, and this was no place for a fight. A single tear slid down her cheek as she put on a show of weakness. Mr. Hale, if Mrs. Hale wants to go to Anchorage, I don't mind the cold. Please don't fight because of me. Mrs. Hale. Mr. Hale pulled all-nighters for days just to clear a week of his schedule. Can't you be a little more understanding? The man stared at me for a moment longer. When he saw I wasn't going to change my mind, he said one thing: don't regret this. Then he turned and walked through the boarding gate. The woman wiped away her tear, gave me a faint smile, and hurried after him. After Ethan left, I stood there for what felt like an eternity, all the strength draining from my body. I don't know how long passed before I finally boarded a plane bound for Anchorage alone. Maybe it was the bitter cold of Anchorage that froze every last bit of feeling I had for Ethan Hale. I barely thought about him that entire week. I had the time of my life there. I even waited in line for free candy apples and frozen grapes. I was planning to stay a few more days when Ethan finally called me. He said, Ren, you've been throwing a tantrum since our wedding day. I don't have the patience to keep coddling you. I looked at the lopsided snowman I'd built and suddenly laughed. I don't need you to. I took my last bite of candy apple and hung up on him for the first time ever. Ethan seemed to have forgotten that on the day we were supposed to get our marriage license, his secretary had called him away with a fever. We were never actually married. While I was still in Anchorage, news spread through our elite social circle that Ethan Hale had gone on honeymoon with Angela Carter. I'd deliberately avoided my phone all week, so I had no idea what they'd been doing. It wasn't until a friend told me that I found out. They'd spent the entire week traveling together. Angela had posted photos every single day. Went hiking with the boss today. He didn't wait for me. The photo showed Ethan's back as he walked ahead. Later, they went boating on a lake, soaked in hot springs, and even went bungee jumping. They hopped from city to city, leaving traces everywhere like a couple deeply in love. I couldn't deny that seeing those photos still hurt. The next day, I bought a ticket back home and left Anchorage. As soon as the plane landed, I went straight to Ethan's company. I found Angela Carter and slammed her photos down on her desk. Angela, were you really that desperate to rub this in my face? Couldn't you at least wait until after Ethan and I broke up? Do you have no shame at all? The woman looked terrified, biting her lower lip. Mrs. Hale, you've got it all wrong. I just posted those to remember the trip. That's all. Besides, Mr. Hale said it was okay. Those words Mr. Hale said it was okay sent a sharp, stabbing pain through my chest. I'd thought these photos were just Angela's way of hurting me. I never imagined Ethan was complicit. He was letting another woman humiliate me in public. Letting everyone call me the wife who couldn't keep her husband. At the sound of Angela's crying, the office door slammed open. Ethan handed her a tissue to wipe her tears, then turned to me with a cold face. Ren, this is not a place for you. Get out. I met his gaze and saw nothing but ice in his eyes. My eyes burned, and I felt tears threatening to spill over. I turned quickly to leave, but he called after me. Ren, this is the last time I'll tolerate your unreasonable behavior. If you do this again, we're getting a divorce. I laughed bitterly. How do you get divorced from a marriage that never even happened? We never got a license. We never had a wedding. I turned around to look at him. I saw him gently brushing a tear from Angela's cheek. His touch was so tender. I'd always known Angela was different to Ethan. She'd been his secretary since graduating college. 5 whole years. They'd spent more time together than Ethan and I had combined. I used to think that if I loved him hard enough, he'd love me back. But now, reality had hit me like a ton of bricks. Love isn't something you earn with how much you give. Ethan hadn't expected me to turn back. His hand froze mid-motion. I smiled at him. Ethan, don't wait for next time. We're done, right now. Mrs. Hale. This is all my fault. I'll resign immediately. Please don't blame Mr. Hale. Angela grabbed Ethan's sleeve, tears streaming down her face again. Mr. Hale, if you just talk to her, she'll forgive you. I know she will. Humph. Let her leave if she wants. Just don't come crawling back to me in a few days. Angela's pleas only made Ethan angrier. I watched in amusement as she touched him over and over again. And he never pushed her away. No one knew that after chasing Ethan for 5 years, I'd never even held his hand. The day he finally agreed to be with me, I'd worked up the courage to take his hand, but the second my fingers brushed his pinky, he'd stepped back sharply. His expression had been cold and distant. I'm sorry, I'm just not used to that yet. I'd been so embarrassed that day, and so disappointed. I'd told myself over and over that it would get better once we were married. But today, I finally understood. He just wasn't used to me touching him. I gave Ethan one last look, and then I was done. No more longing, no more hope. When I got home, I told my parents I didn't want to be with Ethan anymore. They stared at me in shock, then exchanged worried glances. It turned out my family's company was in trouble. We desperately needed the funding from Hale Industries. This engagement wasn't something I could just walk away from, not unless I found someone more powerful than the Hales to back us up. So less than half a day later, I swallowed my pride and called Ethan. I wanted to beg him, even if we didn't get married, to at least not pull the funding from my family's company. I'd step aside. He could be with Angela. I called 15 times before someone finally answered. Miss Monroe. Mr. Hale is in a business meeting. You shouldn't disturb him. I took a deep breath, lowering my voice as much as I could. Then please ask him to call me back when he's done. Angela's voice dripped with sarcasm on the other end. Mr. Hale doesn't have time for people who don't matter. Why don't you come find him in person? She gave me an address, and I rushed over. When I arrived, she was standing at the door like she'd been waiting for me. Miss Monroe, Mr. Hale just finished his meeting. He's inside waiting for you. But when I pushed open the door, I found more than a dozen people inside, drinking and laughing, all the top names in business. Ethan lifted his wine glass to his lips, glaring at me with displeasure. Get out. Angela was nowhere to be seen behind me. I knew I'd been tricked. I cursed under my breath and was about to close the door when a voice stopped me. He was sitting directly across from Ethan Hale, exuding an aura of cold intensity that made even Ethan seem mild by comparison. The second he spoke, Ethan, despite his annoyance, changed his mind and told me to come in. I walked into the private room and finally got a good look at the man who'd spoken up. It was Julian Sterling, the eldest son of Sterling Group. He was leaning back lazily on the couch, legs crossed, his eyes scanning me from head to toe. We stared at each other for a full minute. Ethan suddenly stepped between us, blocking his view of me. "What are you doing here?" I wanted nothing more than to leave, but the words stuck in my throat. Before Ethan's patience ran out, I finally spoke. "Ethan, about our engagement." "Oh, regretting it already. Ren, you really are that obsessed with me, aren't you?" Ethan scoffed, his tone dripping with mockery. Everyone in the room laughed. They'd all heard about my pathetic infatuation with Ethan Hale. They were just here for the show. I opened my mouth to correct him, when the sound of a wine glass being set down sharply cut through the laughter. The room went silent. Julian Sterling stood up, adjusting his jacket. There was a faint smile on his lips, but his eyes burned with an unidentifiable anger. "Since Mr. Hale is busy, we'll wrap this up for today." When Julian left, everyone else in the room followed him out. Angela chose that exact moment to run in, her voice full of fake remorse. "Mr. Hale, I'm so sorry." I tried to stop her, but she wouldn't listen. Ethan waved her off, rubbing his throbbing temple, looking exhausted. He'd worked so hard to get Julian Sterling to come to this meeting. The Sterling Group had their eyes set on the West Side development, and Ethan had been hoping to negotiate a partnership. Now, thanks to Ren, it was all ruined. In a bad mood, he took his anger out on her. "Don't make me say it again. Go home." I hadn't expected Ethan to yell at me like that. Even when he'd hated me before, he'd only ever been cold. He'd never spoken to me so harshly. I flinched at his shout, tears instantly filling my eyes. I wanted to tell him I wasn't here to beg him to take me back, but I couldn't get a single word out. No matter why I'd come, in his eyes, I was always the one in the wrong. Ethan, fed up, grabbed his secretary's arm and left the room. I was alone in the quiet private room. That's when I finally broke down crying. I hadn't realized walking away from love would hurt this much. I cried for a long time, completely unaware that someone else had entered the room. His voice suddenly cut through my sobs, making me jump. "Stop crying. You're being too loud." I looked up with red, puffy eyes at the man standing over me. He held up his phone. "Sorry, I forgot my phone." He paused for a moment, then spoke again. "I had no idea Miss Monroe was so deeply in love with Mr. Hale." Impressive. There was a sharp edge to his voice that I couldn't quite place. I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of a stranger. I stood up from the floor, wiping my tears. "I don't love him anymore. Not at all." He snorted, clearly not believing me. My reputation as Ethan's obsessed stalker preceded me. I grew desperate to prove him wrong. I really didn't come here to get back together with him. I just wanted to beg him not to pull the funding from my family's company now that we're breaking up. He didn't I anything for a long time. I don't know why I'd told him all that. I brushed off my dress, grabbed my bag, and started to leave. Julian stepped in front of me, his eyes dark and intense as he looked at me. "Is that true? You really don't love him anymore?" I nodded, certain. A slow smile spread across his face, growing wider and wider. He reached out and ruffled my hair, looking almost proud. "Good girl." That night, I don't remember how Julian ended up driving me home. I lay in bed, completely dazed. Julian had said he would save my family's company. The only condition, marry him. I pulled the covers over my head, trying to shake off the ridiculous thought. I tossed and turned all night, and unsurprisingly, I didn't sleep a wink. But I didn't have time to make a decision. The next morning, my parents told me the funding from Hale Industries had been cancelled. My father paced frantically in the living room, and my mother sat on the couch crying. I didn't know if it was because of what had happened yesterday, but the timing was too perfect. I felt guilty. After a long silence, my father turned to me, his face red with shame. "Ren, could you go beg Ethan one more time?" I have no other options left. I knew how hard it was for my father, who'd always doted on me, to say those words. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Don't worry, Dad. I'll handle it." After how badly things had gone yesterday, I really didn't want to see Ethan again, but compared to a stranger who'd just asked me to marry him out of nowhere, Ethan felt like the safer option. I went straight to his company again. This time, Angela didn't stop me. She seemed to have been expecting me, smiling sweetly as she led me into Ethan's office. She closed the door behind her when she left. I saw Ethan sitting with his back to me, his head in his hands, looking exhausted. He didn't give me a chance to speak. He didn't even turn around. If you're here about the funding, you can leave. The board already made their decision. Ethan, are you doing this to punish me? Because I yelled at Angela. Ethan turned around, his eyes still sharp. Ren, people have to face the consequences of their actions. Angela is not someone you can just push around. There's nothing I can do about the funding. Once Ethan made up his mind, almost no one could change it. I laughed bitterly. I'd been so naive. I'd thought that after all these years, I might mean something to him, but I'd just been fooling myself. I didn't beg him anymore. I left, closing the door softly behind me, closing the door on that chapter of my life. That's it, I thought. We're even now. Leaving so soon. Miss Monroe. How pathetic, throwing yourself at him like that. And he still doesn't care about you. I turned to glare at the woman, anger boiling over inside me. Before she could react, I stepped forward and slapped her twice across the face. Then I walked away without looking back. Outside Hale Industries, I pulled out my phone and called Julian Sterling. He answered on the third ring, his voice lazy, like he'd just woken up. I told you I'd give you 3 days to think about it. Ren, there's no rush. I gripped my phone tightly, glancing back one last time at the window to Ethan's office. Then I closed my eyes. Julian, let's get married. Julian's funding was deposited into my family's company account in less than an hour. My parents called me home and yelled at me for the first time in my life. Even if the company goes bankrupt, I won't let you sell yourself like this. I'm sending this money back to that Sterling boy right now. My mother cried, holding my hand. Ren, baby, we don't want you to sacrifice your happiness for us. I fought back the tears threatening to fall and smiled at them. Julian and I are in love. I want to marry him. I lied through my teeth, spinning a story about how I'd fallen for Julian and couldn't live without him. My parents were skeptical, so they found Julian's phone number and called him themselves. Before I could stop them, he'd already answered, and he was surprisingly charming. Mr. and Mrs. Monroe. I'm so sorry we didn't tell you sooner. Ren was just nervous. Please don't be mad at her. Blame me instead. I don't know what else he said, but by the end of the call, my father was laughing. He hung up the phone, grinning from ear to ear. That boy is perfect. What a catch for our Ren. That same afternoon, Julian showed up at our house with a truck full of gifts. My mother immediately sent the housekeeper Maggie to the grocery store to make dinner. After we ate, Julian suddenly announced that he wanted to go get our marriage license that day. It was so sudden that all three of us froze, but after singing his praises all afternoon, my parents couldn't very well say no, and so, in a daze, we made it to the county clerk's office just before closing and got our marriage license. He said he wanted to give me a grand wedding, and he'd already picked a date. Since Julian said we should keep the wedding a secret for now, no one found out. No one knew we were married. Over the next few days, I was busy taking wedding photos and picking out furniture. I barely had time to breathe. My friends kept asking me to hang out, but I was too busy. When they finally came to my house to find me, they saw the wedding dress delivery people, and just like that, news of my wedding spread like wildfire. At the exclusive private club, Ethan had been coming every single night lately. He'd drink until he was completely wasted before leaving. Someone brought up my wedding, teasing him. Hey Ethan, you never had a wedding with Ren. Do you think this is her way of forcing you to give her one? Are you gonna go to the wedding? Ethan said nothing, just downed another shot of whiskey. There was a hint of disdain in his eyes. She's just being ridiculous. I'm not going to indulge her. Everyone cheered. That's our Ethan. What a man. They were all here for the show, already imagining how embarrassed I'd be on my wedding day. Poor Ren. She's gonna be so heartbroken when he doesn't show up. Heartbroken. She'll probably divorce him out of spite. Haha, that's exactly what Ethan wants, right? Then he can finally be with his little secretary. Ethan sat there drinking silently, growing more and more irritable. Suddenly, he stood up and glared at everyone. Ren is not someone you get to talk about like that. Watch your mouths. I hadn't expected Ethan to come looking for me, especially not in the middle of the night. My parents were already asleep. Maggie asked me if I wanted to let him in. I told her to open the door, then threw on a robe and went downstairs. Ethan reeked of alcohol. His face flushed. He was clearly drunk. I didn't want to wake my parents, so I talked to him in the backyard. It was cold outside, and I just wanted to go back inside. What do you want, Ethan? He stared at me intently. You're planning a wedding. I didn't know how he'd found out, but I wasn't going to lie. I nodded, saying nothing. Ethan laughed coldly, looking disgusted. Ren, do you really need a wedding that badly? I already took you on our honeymoon. Isn't that enough? The nerve of him to bring up the honeymoon. I gave him a withering look, but didn't bother arguing. It wasn't worth my time. What does my wedding have to do with you? I didn't invite you. I turned and ran back toward the house. Done with his drunken nonsense, Ethan yelled after me through gritted teeth. Fine, Ren, we'll see how you like having a wedding all by yourself. I'm not coming. As he watched Ren's retreating back, Ethan's headache worsened. These past few weeks, Julian Sterling had been waging an all-out war against Hale Industries. The board had voted to cancel the funding for the Monroe's company. Ethan was swamped with work, and he didn't have time to coddle Ren, and now she was planning some stupid wedding. His parents were already regretting agreeing to the engagement. This was the worst possible time for her to be causing a scene. She should be by his side, supporting him. Ethan sighed deeply, shaking his head helplessly. She was his fiancée. What else could he do? On the day of the wedding, half the elite social circle showed up to watch the drama unfold. Even a lot of people from the Sterling group were there. No one wanted to miss this. Ethan hadn't been able to convince his parents to come, but he'd put on a tuxedo anyway. He couldn't bear to let Ren become the laughingstock of the entire city. But he'd only been driving for 15 minutes when his phone rang. It was Angela. Her voice was breathless and panicked. Mr. Hale, my asthma is acting up. I don't have my inhaler. Please help me. Ethan knew Angela had asthma. She'd mentioned a few days ago that she needed to pick up a new inhaler from the pharmacy. He'd been too busy to remind her. This was his fault. Ethan checked the time. The wedding was in less than an hour. If he hurried, he could still make it. He made a sharp U-turn and drove to the pharmacy to get her inhaler, then raced to her apartment. He'd been there a few times before, so the doorman let him in. He had a spare key to her place, but when he opened the door, he found her sitting on the couch in her pajamas, casually eating fruit. She froze when she saw him, quickly hiding the fruit behind her back. Her face was perfectly healthy, no sign of an asthma attack at all. Mr. Hale, I found my inhaler. I'm fine now. Ethan didn't believe her, but he didn't have time to argue. He threw the inhaler at her and turned to leave, but she threw her arms around his waist, holding on tight. Mr. Hale, you don't love her. Why do you keep trying to save her? Let her be embarrassed. Don't go. You've done enough for her already. Ethan pried her arms off him one by one, angry for the first time ever. Angela, this is none of your business. Let go. I sat in the dressing room, staring at my reflection. I looked beautiful. The wedding I'd dreamed of for so many years was finally happening, and it was Julian Sterling who was giving it to me. I'd waited and hoped for Ethan for so long, but he never came. In that moment, all those years of longing felt like a distant dream. I smiled at the woman in the mirror, and then I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. The makeup artist laughed gently. You're so happy you're crying, aren't you? You and Mr. Sterling make such a perfect couple. My mother wiped away my tears, her own eyes wet. My baby girl is getting married to the man she loves. I'm so happy for you. My parents still didn't know about the deal between Julian and me, and I never planned to tell them. No matter why Julian had married me, he'd saved my family. This was my choice. My father walked me down the aisle, his hand trembling as he placed mine in Julian's. Julian's hand was warm and strong, wrapping completely around mine. He brushed his thumb over my cold knuckles, whispering, "Why are your hands so cold?" There was so much concern and tenderness in his eyes that I looked away, uncomfortable. In front of all our guests, we exchanged rings. Under the spotlight, Julian leaned in slowly, and we shared our first kiss as husband and wife. His lips were cool, but they burned against mine. Surrounded by cheers and congratulations, I stared at the diamond ring sparkling on my finger. I was married to a man who had been a complete stranger just a few weeks ago. I changed into a reception dress, and we started going around to toast our guests. That's when the door suddenly burst open. Ethan Hale stood there, gasping for breath, like he'd run all the way there. He froze in the doorway for a long moment, then walked slowly toward me. His eyes red. His voice shook when he spoke. "Ren. Who is he?" I hadn't expected this reaction from Ethan. I thought he didn't love me. Why was he acting like he was the one who'd been hurt? Before I could answer, Julian pulled me behind him, shielding me completely. "I'm Ren's husband. Thank you for coming to our wedding." Julian held out his hand, perfectly polite. In that moment, Ethan went completely rigid. He stared at the wedding ring on Julian's finger, and a bitter taste filled his mouth. He'd never imagined Ren would marry anyone but him. He'd always been so confident that she loved him. How could she? How could she just leave him behind like this? If she wanted a wedding, he would have given her one. If she wanted a honeymoon, he would have taken her anywhere she wanted. But it was too late now. That day, everyone saw how broken Ethan Hale was. Everyone except me. I was standing safely behind Julian. Ethan drank himself into a stupor at the club for 2 straight days. His parents had to come get him themselves. When his friends helped him stand up, he could barely walk. Mr. Hale didn't coddle him. He slapped Ethan hard across the face. Mrs. Hale pulled her son into her arms, crying. Mr. Hale was furious. "You useless boy, making a fool of yourself over a woman. You've disgraced the entire Hale family. Not wanting to air their dirty laundry in public." He lowered his voice. "When did you and Ren get divorced? Why didn't you tell us?" At the mention of my name, Ethan finally looked up. His eyes were bloodshot and filled with tears. "We never got divorced." Everyone in the room gasped. Mrs. Hale stood up, ready to storm over to the Monroe's house and demand answers. "Because we never got married." Ethan broke down sobbing, his whole body shaking. On the day they were supposed to get their marriage license, Angela had called him with a fever. He'd been 1 foot inside the county clerk's office, but he'd turned around and left. He'd told Ren to wait for him. He'd be right back. But he'd never come back, and Ren had never reminded him. Later, Ethan had known they still didn't have a marriage license. But what did a piece of paper matter? Even when he'd been impatient with her, even when he'd been cold, he'd gotten used to having Ren around. He'd always assumed she was his, so he'd conveniently forgotten about that piece of paper. Now, Ethan regretted it more than anything in the world. The day after our wedding, Julian flew me back to Anchorage. He took me skiing. We built a snowman together. We ate candy apples until our teeth hurt. We wore thick coats and hats and gloves, and we explored every corner of Anchorage. One afternoon, I woke up from a nap to find Julian standing in the yard, talking on the phone. The sun was shining down on him, making him glow. In that moment, I realized I was starting to care about this man. Julian hung up the phone when he saw me awake. He walked quickly over to the bed and gently pressed his hand to my forehead. "Did I wake you? You should sleep a little longer." I stared at him, the question I'd been dying to ask finally slipping out. "Why me, Julian? Why did you marry me?" He smiled, leading me outside to a small photography studio. The walls were covered in photos, but my eyes were drawn to one in particular. It was a photo of a girl bundled up in a thick coat, squatting next to a snowman, taking a huge bite of a candy apple. I recognized myself immediately. The studio owner came over and greeted Julian. Then he saw me staring at the photo and laughed. "Mr. Sterling brought that photo in himself. I thought it was so beautiful." I begged him to let me display it. I turned to look at Julian, blinking back tears. "Julian, when did you start liking me?" He wiped away my tears and pulled me into his arms, his voice soft as he remembered. "Before you fell in love with Ethan Hale, you were always running after him. Your eyes fixed only on him. I crossed your path 99 times, and you never once looked at me. So I waited, and I waited, for the day you'd finally turn around and see me. I had no idea that during my 5 years of chasing Ethan, there had been someone behind me, chasing me, waiting for me. That day, we held each other in the middle of the snow, and I felt warmer than I ever had in my life. The studio owner captured that moment and gave us the photo as a gift. Julian and I traveled for 3 months before coming home. He took me to every single place Ethan had gone with Angela. Julia N told me I never had to be jealous of anyone else. Anything I wanted, he would move heaven and earth to give it to me. The day we got back, a friend told me that Ethan had fired Angela. No one knew exactly why, but they said Angela had gone to work for Ethan's biggest competitor. She'd stolen several major contracts from Hale Industries. The company was in chaos. The board had lost all confidence in Ethan, and he'd been forced to step down from all his positions. And once Angela had used him up, she'd discarded him just like everyone else. Later, I found out why Ethan had fired her. The day he'd gone back to the office after the wedding, he'd overheard Angela talking to her coworkers. Angela, when are we gonna start calling you Mrs. Hale? Yeah, you have to put in a good word for us once you're the boss's wife. Oh, stop it. Nothing's official yet. But there was no mistaking the pride and ambition in her eyes. She already thought she was Mrs. Hale. Flattered by their praise, she got cocky. It's all Ren's fault. That stupid woman wasted 5 years of our lives. If it wasn't for her, Mr. Hale and I would have been together ages ago. That's when Ethan walked in. He stared coldly at everyone, then fixed his gaze on Angela. Say that again. Angela paled, trying to play the victim and lie her way out of it. But this time, Ethan didn't let her. One look from him, and her coworkers spilled everything. They showed him all the photos Angela had posted during the honeymoon. Ethan stared at the phone, his jaw clenched with rage. He'd only told her she could post one photo, just enough to make Ren jealous, just enough to make her come crawling back to him. He'd had no idea this woman, who'd always seemed so sweet and obedient, had posted 7 days' worth of photos, every single one taken to make it look like they were a couple. In that moment, Ethan finally understood why Ren had broken up with him. Angela begged him for forgiveness on the day he fired her. He didn't show her an ounce of mercy. When she realized there was no way back, she threw her head back and laughed bitterly. Ethan Hale, if you'd cared about Ren even a little bit, she never would have left you for someone else. You deserve this. 6 months after our wedding, I found out I was pregnant. We were at the hospital for my first checkup when we ran into Ethan. He was coming out of the neurology department, being treated for insomnia. He'd lost a lot of weight. He looked gaunt and hollow. When he saw us, he froze. Something flashed in his eyes. He didn't say hello, but when he walked past me, he stopped. He didn't dare look at me. He kept his distance. His voice, once so cold and confident, was rough and broken. Ren, I'm sorry. Then he walked away. By the end, he was almost running. He disappeared into the crowd. I stared after him for a long time. Julian squeezed my hand gently. What? Feeling sorry for your ex? I punched him playfully in the chest, but I still couldn't take my eyes off Ethan's retreating back. He's changed so much. Julian turned my face to look at him. Deadpan. He's gotten old. He laced his fingers through mine, and we walked out of the hospital together. A year later, I gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Both sets of grandparents were over the moon. They fought over who got to take care of the babies. When the twins turned 3, each set of parents took one. Julian and I finally had our quiet life together. He took me traveling all over the world. We ate the most amazing food. We never fought. Not once. And so, we lived happily ever after.